Hey everyone, Brendan Snyder here. How are you? Thanks so much for joining me and welcome to an album ranking for one of the greatest glam metal bands ever, LA Guns. Since they released their debut in 1988, there has been various versions of the band that have released 23 studio albums over a 37-year period. With the release of their latest album, Leopard Skin, I thought it was time we do a complete album ranking covering all of their great albums from the various lineups and different bands over the years. And we're going to get into that here in just a bit. But before we start, if you're new to my channel and you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please do. Also leave a comment, hit like. All those things do help support my channel. I'd greatly appreciate it. And of course, as an added bonus, by turning on notifications, you'll never miss an episode and stay up to date on really cool videos like this with an LA Guns album ranking. But as I was talking about right at the top of the show, the band has had a very complicated history and catalog of releases, sometimes not knowing who's in what version of the band. There are 23 studio albums under the name LA Guns, and featuring original material, covers, albums, and even some re-recorded material. And at times, there's been 5 versions of the band out there. You've got the original band, would split off into the Phil Lewis version, the Tracii Guns version. There was Paul Black's LA Guns, Riley's LA Guns. So lots of different ones out there. And we're going to cover all those different versions here in this countdown. There were 2 albums of re-recorded material, Greatest Hits and Black Beauties in 1999 and Cocked and Reloaded from 2000. I'm not going to cover those because it's just re-recorded material. I'm going to stick to the studio original material and covers albums, the albums that were actually released proper. So 21 studio albums that we're going to run through here, and we're going to kick off with, at number 21, American Hardcore from 1996. This is the Tracii Guns version of the band and only album to come out under the moniker of the LA Guns. All the other ones are simply just LA Guns. So 5th studio album. Musically, for this one here, the band changed more to an alternative metal sound, very uncharacteristic vocals from Chris Van Dahl, who was part of the band Cherry Street, which was a fantastic glam metal album that definitely had Chris singing in typical glam metal style, but not happening on this one here. It's not a bad album in its own right. It's just not very characteristic of what LA Guns had done up until this point, and I don't think it held the attention for most LA Guns fans. I remember really trying to get into it at the time. It didn't, quite do for me what I wanted it to do. And it's just one of those ones I do not go back to and visit all that often due to the change in sound, style, vocals, just about everything to it. Maybe if it come out under a different name, a real different name other than something associated with LA Guns, it might have done more. Okay, coming in at number 20, Covered in Guns. This is a Phil Lewis version of the band. It's a mishmash of cover songs, no real cohesive feel to it. They did covers ranging from Def Leppard, Kiss, Blue Oyster Cult, but then also later era groups and alternative rock groups, Buckcherry, Alice in Chains, and then going all the way back to like bands like Beach Boys. It was just didn't have a cohesive feel, and they recorded it at different times or at least released at different times on other compilations and things, and then ultimately gathered up here. So like I said, doesn't have a very cohesive feel to it. Okay, coming in at number 19, Dark Horse from 2024. Riley's LA Guns put this out. This is the second and final studio album from the Steve Riley and Kelly Nichols version of the band. Kelly Nichols being an original bassist of LA Guns. Steve Riley coming in being part of the first album, although he didn't record the debut album. He would record on the second album, but Steve Riley, Kelly Nichols, part of the heyday era of the group. In this version, Riley's LA Guns. Very good album in its own right. but they start to branch out and move a little away from the classic LA Guns sound. Once they did that without having that classic LA Guns sound and or having Phil Lewis at the front helm to at least bring people along, I sort of felt that the album fell away from what was making it have that LA Guns feel and maybe shouldn't be called LA Guns anymore. Okay, next up, coming in at number 18, Hollywood Rehearsal from 1997. This is the original band. It's a collection of demos featuring mostly cover songs and was only released in Japan. Tracks 1 through 6 do not feature Tracii Guns. 7 through 10, it is the whole band. It's very poor quality recording, though. It is said to be a collection of demos, cover songs. Fun to hear, fun to listen to, but just as a whole, I think due to its poor recording quality is one of the reasons I don't go back to it all that often. Coming in at number 17, Rips the Covers Off from 2004. This is the Phil Lewis version of the band. Another album of cover songs recorded all at the same time, though, by all the same band members. So a much more cohesive feel than the Covered in Guns from 2010. This one here I think is a lot stronger. It's got the sound, the energy, everything you expect from LA Guns doing this. The selection of songs are more what you would expect from these guys to be put out, and the style of the songs all stay consistent. So a far better collection of covers. If you're going to pick one up out of those three, pick this one up. I think it's a really great one. Okay, coming in at number 16, Black Diamonds from 2023. This is the Phil and Tracii version of the band, 14th studio album and 4th studio album since those two guys reunited in 2017. While the first 3 reunion albums that those guys did were very strong, despite maybe sometimes needing what I think was a better production or a better mix on those albums felt really good and strong. This one here kind of came off feeling tired right from the start. There's just something about it that never connected with me. A little bit of a misstep, maybe. I'm not sure. Maybe rushing, getting albums out. But I think arguably the part of this that doesn't work for me the most is the mix on it. If it had a better mix, it might be something that the songs would come across better. But all in all, not too much to write home about this album. Coming in at number 15, Shrinking Violet from 1999. This is a Tracii Guns-led version of the band. It is the 6th studio album released, featuring vocalist Jizzy Pearl from Love Hate. So really great having Jizzy Pearl in the lineup. I mean, I'm a huge Love Hate fan and was at the time, so getting him in the band, it was a really cool thing to do and have. But the album ended up taking on more the feel of a Love Hate album than an LA Guns album, maybe because Jizzy's vocals are so prominent and distinctive that without having Phil in there, the album leaned one way or the other on it. Still a lot of great songs on this album. Girl You Turn Me On, the opening track, Dreamtime, Barbed Wire, and my personal favorite, Decide, off of here. So good album, just not having that overall classic feel, maybe due to Jizzy's vocals on it. Coming in at number 14, Renegades from 2020. This is Riley's LA Guns, and it was the debut studio album put out by Steve Riley, Kelly Nichols, two guys from the original heyday. Also featuring Scott Griffin on guitar, who was a bass player for LA Guns, years earlier. Vocals were handled by Kurt Froelich, who I think does an outstanding job bringing across that, sleazy sound that is LA Guns. Great vocalist to come in to do that. Real cool, standout, classic sounding LA Guns material on here. Songs like Crawl, Well-Oiled Machine, and Renegades. Because of that, I think this album can stand in line with the rest of these albums, even though we don't have, of course, Phil Lewis and Tracii Guns as part of it. All right, next, coming in at number 13, Blacklist. This was 2005 and is from Paul Black's LA Guns. It's a compilation of demos that were recorded with original vocalist Paul Black before the band was signed. It shows the full, raw fire of the original band in here, leaning more towards the punk side of things than sort of the glam metal sleaze rock side that would come out on the debut and the albums going forward. Fantastic album. Paul Black would even go out and do some shows and tour his own version of LA Guns for that release, even though those songs were recorded earlier with, Tracii Guns in that version of the band and stuff. But if you want to hear something pre the debut that's got as much energy and fire on it, dig up a copy of this, Paul Black's LA Guns. If Paul Black had stayed on as vocalist, I think the band still would have done really well. Okay, coming in at number 12, Hollywood Forever from 2012. This is the Phil Lewis version of the band, 10th studio album. Guitars are handled by Stacey Blades from Rock's Gang. He did a fantastic job. Steve Riley still in this version. And I must clarify that ultimately it was really Steve Riley's LA Guns because he's the one who owned 50% rights to the name. Tracii owned the other 50%, which is why he could be out there. Phil Lewis was hired on. He did not own any rights to the name, which is ultimately why he left this version and could join up with Tracii later on and do what they're doing today. But this one here, because the most defining feature of it is Phil's voice, that's why I'm referring to these as the Phil Lewis-led version of the bands. But I do want to give credit where credit is due. It really was Steve Riley who was leading it and owned the name and that sort of stuff. Still, fantastic album. It's the last one with this lineup of the group, and I'm glad that we got Phil and Tracii back together, but this was such a great version of the band that it was a little sad to see it end here with Hollywood Forever, which was another fantastic album, much like the previous album, Tales from the Strip, recorded before this one. It's just an album that smokes all the way through, recapturing a lot of the band's glory days. The second track on here is absolutely killer, called You Better Not Leave Me. Check that one out. Okay, coming in at number 11, Man in the Moon from 2001. This is the original band reuniting to do this here. 7th studio album. The band actually reunited around 1999, but didn't get around to recording a studio album until now. They did the Greatest Hits and Black Beauties, re-recording of the hits. They did the Cocked and Reloaded, a re-recording, a Millennium version in 2000 of Cocked and Loaded before they did first new studio album, and that's what this one is here. So it's the original band, though, minus Kelly Nichols on bass. He chose not to continue with the group at that point, doing the new album. Taking over on bass was Muddy. It's a very strong album, but less of the sleaze rock sounding stuff from the first two albums, much more of the straight ahead rock approach, leaning into what they did on the third studio album with Hollywood Vampires. Featuring great songwriting on this. A little bit different though for fans who were expecting a return to that sleaze rock sound. Didn't really happen on this, but it does feature one of my all-time favorite LA Guns songs called Beautiful. It's a fantastic mid-paced rocker that's totally worth checking out just for that alone on the album. All right, coming in at number 10, Checkered Past from 2021, the Phil and Tracii version, 13th studio album overall, third since the reunion of those two. For me, this album here was a real breath of fresh air coming in from the band. While the two previous reunion albums of Phil and Tracii, The Missing Piece in 2017 and The Devil You Know in 2019, were amazing return to form albums. They built upon what Phil Lewis was already doing with his great version of the band with Stacey Blades. So that was fantastic. But I have to say that in a way, it was also starting to retread a bit. And not that I didn't want to hear that, and not that any of that was necessarily tiring at all. But this coming out and sounding different and having the band explore some of the different things that they did on this album was that breath of fresh air, and I really, really enjoyed it at that time. All right, coming in at number 9, the brand new Leopard Skin album from 2025. This is a Phil and Tracii version. It's the 15th studio album overall from LA Guns. That's of course not counting the Riley's LA Guns or the Paul Black's LA Guns. And of course doesn't count in things like the covers albums and stuff like that. But 15th when we talk about it that way, and 5th since the reunion of Phil and Tracii. As I said, it is the latest. It definitely has its most in common with third studio album Hollywood Vampires, where they began to branch out from the straight ahead sleaze rock sound. Also Man in the Moon, 2001, we talked about that, and Checkered Past in 2021. So if you like those 3 albums, I think you're gonna like this one a lot. Very, very good, sounds fresh, sounds like the band's having fun on it, and I always love that with LA Guns albums. All right, coming in at number 8, The Devil You Know from 2019, Phil and Tracii version of the band, 12th studio album, 2nd since the reunion of Phil and Tracii. This one here, another killer album building after that first one. Second track on here, Stay Away, is such a killer. It just burns so hard all the way through on it from that track. Lots of great ones on the album. The title track, The Devil You Know, Needle to the Bone, and boom, the bonus track turned out to be really great. Don't know why it was relegated as a bonus track, but a very good song nonetheless. All right, and coming in at number 7, The Missing Piece from 2017, Phil and Tracii version of the band, 11th studio album overall, but the debut of the Phil and Tracii reunion. This one here, after the opener, which I think they could have probably picked a better song as the opener. The second track, Speed, is such a burner on here. That song smokes from top to bottom, making it totally worthwhile just for that one alone. But again, the album is very strong. Great to have the band back, showing that, Phil and Tracii could make great albums apart from the overall lineup, but when those guys come together, they really have something special, and it really comes through in fine fashion on this one. All the vim, vigor, and everything of the original era of the band is shown from start to finish on this. Definitely a fantastic album. Okay, coming in at number 6, Waking the Dead from 2002, original band, 8th studio album, follow-up to the reunion album Man in the Moon from 2001. But this is where sort of the cracks started to form. Again, we lose another original member. Mick Cripps steps away, so we're down to just Phil, Tracii, and Steve at this point. Still sounded very good, having a classic feel. I actually think it was stronger than Man in the Moon. I like Man in the Moon because of its freshness and a different feel, and the band was branching out. But this one here is that classic LA Guns sound to it. Killer opening track, Don't Look at Me That Way. One of their best songs, definitely. All right, coming in at number 5, Tales from the Strip from 2005. This is a Phil Lewis version of the band. This one has all the sleaze and power of the first 4 studio albums. I think this thing is absolutely stellar. And yes, despite not having Tracii Guns in the lineup, Stacey Blades of Rocksgang shines through. He was an amazing guitar player for the band, keeping the band name alive the way that he did in the style that he did. Opening track, It Don't Mean Nothing, just all of the classic sounds that you would expect from LA Guns shown right there, but they just continue through on this album all the way through. Highly, highly recommend that, of course, as I will these next 4 fantastic albums here. And coming in at number 4, we've got Vicious Circle from 1994, the original band, the 4th studio album that they put out. It was recorded without drummer Steve Riley, so only 2 albums in the catalog not recorded with Steve Riley. This one, the debut drummer named Bones would handle the drums on this one. And it's where the band really continued expanding their horizons in musical style. They were doing that with Hollywood Vampire, but really moved outside of that, almost moving into some metal tracks with songs like Face Down and Killing Machine. and it would really show or foreshadow where the band was gonna go, where Tracii was gonna take the band on American hardcore in 1996. And while we don't get to that extreme level, and I think Phil's vocals ultimately saved the album, where if they were going to get that heavy, you had to have something to tie it back, and Phil's vocals definitely do that. But they also have on here one of my all-time favorite LA Guns songs, and it's not sung by Phil Lewis. Nothing Better to Do, sung by bassist Kelly Nichols. I absolutely love that song. It's my favorite song off of this album here, and has long since been one of my favorite songs. And I had wanted Kelly to take vocals in the Steve Riley's version of LA Guns, but as far as I know, he didn't do that at all. At least it was never called out if he did. I don't know if he ever performed Nothing Better to Do live in concert, but I hope that he did, because it was such a great song. Okay, coming in at number 3, the self-titled debut album from 1988, the original band. This one here, as I mentioned, Steve Riley does not play on it. Instead, Nikki Alexander handles drums, but Steve Riley is mentioned on the inside as being part of the band. Probably the dirtiest, sleaziest of all their albums, mixing punk, rock, metal all together. The first 4 songs on here are absolute classic. No Mercy, Sex Action, One More Reason, Electric Gypsy. I mean, you can't get much better than that. Those 4 songs. I'm always kind of surprised that the album didn't explode and do better than it did, being the way that it was, having those great songs on it, just the down and dirty nature. Maybe it didn't get quite the promotion it needed to. Ultimately, it would go gold and be one of their most successful albums, but I think it should have done even better than that. It's just that good. Okay, coming in at number 2, Hollywood Vampires from 1991, original band, their 3rd studio album. While not as successful as their first 2 studio albums, this one ultimately did not achieve gold status on it. At the time, you got to remember, this was 1991, and it did surprisingly well, even with the rise of grunge and alternative rock music, the band having videos played during the daytime along with all those other bands and showing they could hold their own next to those groups, I thought was a pretty cool thing, making the album even stronger than it actually, or maybe was, I don't know, but it probably would have sold better had there been more support and push behind it. Ultimately, a fantastic album, though. The Dead did have the band branching out and trying new things. And I think that's what really made this album feel so fresh and exciting to me at the time. Definitely moving in that direction, and was great for the time and era that it came out in. Openings, first single off of this album, Kiss My Love Goodbye, very different, but very cool. Love that song. Some Lie for Love and It's Over Now. Great tracks, definitely worth checking out for that alone. And of course, coming in at number 1, Cocked and Loaded from 1989, original band, 2nd studio album. First to feature drummer Steve Riley, actually playing. Steve Riley coming from Wasp and doing a number of other things. Probably the most commercially successful album of the band. Their videos were all over MTV by this point. Rip and Tear, Never Enough. That was the first song that I really knew them from. Hearing it all over the radio. I Want to Be Your Man was a great one. But Ballad of Jane, a top 40 hit for them, reaching number 33 on the Billboard Hot 100. It's the song they'll probably always be known for going forward. But the album was a perfect mix of sleaze and hard rock. I still pull this album out 36 years on. It's lost none of its power and charm over the years. For me, making this the best LA Guns album in my opinion. All right, there you go. That's my album ranking for LA Guns, all 21 of their studio albums. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. It took some real work to try to figure out all the different eras, lineups, names of the band, and get them in some sort of a semblance of an order here. Because as you could see when I was going through this, there's really 15 proper albums, but you've got another 6 on top of that factor into it, which is where we get our 21. All right, everyone, take care, have a good one, and I'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.